In today's video, we will explore Windows Active Directory, what it is and how it works. We will discuss domains and forests and provide a step-by-step guide on setting up Windows Active Directory. First, let's define what Active Directory is. Windows Active Directory is a directory service developed by Microsoft for Windows domain networks. A Windows domain network is a system that connects computers and servers running the Windows operating system. Active Directory is used to manage and store information about various resources, such as users, groups, computers, servers, and policies. It enables administrators to centrally control and organize these resources efficiently. When working with the Windows Active Directory, it is important to understand the concepts of domains and forests. What is an Active Directory forest? Think of an Active Directory forest like a real forest. A forest is a big area that contains many trees. In Active Directory, a forest is a collection of one or more domains that share a common global structure and trust each other. Each domain in Active Directory is like a tree in that forest. A tree stands on its own but is still part of the forest. A domain contains its own users, computers, policies, and security rules, just like a tree has its own branches, leaves, and fruit. All trees in the same forest share common roots, similar to how domains in the same forest share a common schema and a global catalog. Now that you have a clear understanding of Active Directory, domains, and forests, let's move on the technical part. Setting up an Active Directory and creating a domain within a forest. A domain controller is the most important server in your network. Users, computers, and other network resources rely on the domain controller to authenticate and access shared resources. It's important to you as a system administrator to know how to set up a domain controller from scratch, even though your organization has its domains controllers already operational. There are cases when you need to create new domain controllers. For example, your organization opened a new branch office. You can then create a new domain controller and join it to the existing domain. It allows users to authenticate locally on that domain controller instead of authenticating on the remote domain controller using the wide area network that could impact performance. We will use the server manager to create our domain controller using the Add Roles and Features shortcut or the Manage menu. In the wizard that pop-ups, you should pay attention to some recommendations before you continue. The first is to ensure that the administrator password has a strong password. This point is very important. You must choose a strong password for that administrator account. The administrator password shouldn't be easily guessed or cracked, because if someone gets access to the administrator account, he will own all your domain, and the consequences will be terrible. My recommendation is to use a password of at least 12 characters, mixing between letters, numbers, and symbols. The second point is to ensure that the domain controller server has a static IP address. And the third point is to ensure that server has all the security updates installed. If you have installed your server from a recent ISO image, it probably contains recent security updates already integrated into the image. Otherwise, you install the updates first, then you continue. You can also install the updates afterward. When you have met all the prerequisites, press the next button. Here, select the first choice, role-based or feature-based, and click Next. Here you have to select the server you want to promote. If you manage multiple servers in the Server Manager console, you will see them in the server pool. After you select the server, click Next. On this screen, you have the list of available roles that your server can hold. For a domain controller, choose Active Directory Domain Services. A pop-up screen appears to add necessary features related to that role. Alright, now click on Add Feature button. Then click Next. On this screen, you can add additional features, but it's not mandatory, so I click Next. On the ADDS screen, there are some notes you should consider. To help ensure that users can still log on the network in the case of a server outage, install a minimum of 2 domain controllers. It's crucial. You don't want all your infrastructure to rely on one domain controller. The second note states that the domain controller or ADDS requires a DNS. If you don't have a DNS server installed, you will be prompted to install the DNS server role in this machine. And this is what we will do shortly. I click Next. On the summary screen, you get the roles and features you are about to install on the server. Check them, and if it's okay, go ahead and start the installation. You can notice this option right here, allowing you to restart the server if required automatically. I don't encourage you to check this option on production server. If a restart is needed after installing the role or features, plan it off working hours to not impact users and your company business. I click on the Install button to start the installation. The installation succeeded, but additional steps are required to make this machine a domain controller. I close the wizard. You can notice the ADDS role that has been added under the Roles and Server Groups section. And over here, you notice this yellow triangle that generally represents a sign of a warning or a notification. If I click on the icon, I can read more about this notification. It's about a post-deployment configuration action to promote this server to domain controller. So unless I perform this task, I don't have a domain controller yet. So let's do it. I get another wizard. The first step is choosing the deployment operation. There are 3 choices. The first is add a domain controller to an existing domain. We don't have a domain yet, so it's not the option to choose. The second is add a new domain to an existing forest. This option is to choose when you have a domain or multiple domains and you need to add a new one. In this case, the domains are the trees that form the forest. The third option is add a new forest. This is the option I'm going to choose to create a forest with one domain. Next, you need to specify the domain name. Let's say the domain name I want to use is zintech.com. It reflects my company name, Zintech Corp. If my company already has a domain name, zintech.com, for his internet website, creating the same domain name for my local network will create confusion when the internal users want to access the company website. Suppose a local user types www.zintech.com to access the company website. In that case, the local DNS server will say, "Oh, I know this domain name. It's the local domain controller," and it will redirect the user to the domain controller instead of the internet website. To avoid this situation, you can prefix the domain name with something like LAN or local or corp. My domain name will be corp.zintech.com. Perfect. I click Next. On this screen, you need to choose the forest functional level from the list. If you don't have an older version of Windows Server already installed on your network, choose Windows Server 2016 to benefit from the latest features and functionalities. But if you have an existing domain controller with Windows Server 2012 or Windows 2008 in your network, you have to choose the oldest version of your current domain controller. Otherwise, it won't work. The domain functional level will be the same version as the forest level. Next, you need to specify the domain controller capabilities, such as if you need to install the DNS server on this domain controller. I will keep this option checked as we don't have an existing DNS server. You can notice here that my DC will be a global catalog. And this feature is grayed out and you can't change it because the first domain controller in the forest must be a global catalog. A global catalog is an index of all the objects in the domain, such as user accounts, computers, servers, and other resources. So if you search for such an object in the domain, it will be the role of the global catalog to answer your request. The last feature, Read-Only Domain Controller or RODC, allows you to create a domain controller that an administrator or any other person can't change. You can't, for example, create a new user account or change the user password on that domain controller. You may wonder why I need a read-only domain controller if I can't do anything with it. The answer is that RODCs can be useful in certain situations. For example, you have a branch office with a few users and you don't have a system administrator over there to administer servers. So you can install a read-only domain controller in that office, and this RODC will keep synchronizing with the domain controllers in your headquarters. So if you want to change the password of a user working in the branch office, you do it on the domain controller of the headquarters. The second advantage of the RODC in a remote branch office is you don't have to matter about its security, as the server is in read-only mode. It can't be compromised by a third-party actor. As you can see, the feature is grayed out because the first domain controller can't be a read-only domain controller. Alright, now you must type the directory services restore mode password. This password will serve for authoritative restore. I will explain the authoritative restore when covering the backup and recovery section. I type the password twice, click Next. On this screen, we get a warning stating that a delegation for this DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found. You can click on the Show More shortcut to read more details. We get this warning because we don't have a DNS server yet, so we can ignore it and click Next to continue. On this screen, you need to choose the NetBIOS domain name of your domain. The NetBIOS domain name is the short name of your domain, without the .com or .something. The wizard is suggesting corp as a NetBIOS name. He took the first word of my domain name corp.zintech.com. I want a more significant NetBIOS domain name. I will choose Zintech instead. OK. There is nothing to change on this screen. I will keep the default locations and click Next. Here you can review your selections and ensure everything is correct. You can use an interesting option to export this setting to a PowerShell script to automate additional installations. Click on the View Script button. Then you can save the script. Let's create a new folder and name it Script. Type a name for the script and save it. Perfect. I click Next to continue with the wizard. All the prerequisites checks passed successfully. I can click Install to begin installation. Good. You can ignore these warnings here. It will not prevent starting the installation. Another warning here states that a reboot is needed after the installation. It's not a problem. We can reboot this server. It's not in production mode. Okay, let's open the session. You can notice that the username format has changed. The NetBIOS domain name Zintech precedes the username administrator. We know that we are opening a session on the Zintech domain. I type the password. OK. You can notice here the DNS role that has been added during the domain controller configuration. Now our domain controller is all set to go. Good job.